The day I stopped being my family's charity case was the day I realized that silence is the sharpest weapon in a war nobody knew I was fighting. My name is Gabby Huntington, and I'm about to tell you how I went from being the family disappointment to the woman who dismantled everything they built on lies. And I did it all with a smile on my face and tea in my china cups. It started 6 years ago when my daughter, Emma, was born. I was 31, single, working as a real estate appraiser in Boston's most exclusive neighborhoods, living in a modest two-bedroom in Somerville, while my sister, Vanessa, threw birthday parties for her kids that cost more than my annual salary. Vanessa had married into the Prescott family, old Boston money that went back generations, the kind of wealth that came with historical plaques and society page mentions. Her husband, Richard, owned a private equity firm, and together they lived in a restored brownstone in Beacon Hill with their 3 children, 2 golden retrievers, and a staff that included a nanny, a housekeeper, and a personal chef. My mother, Patricia Huntington, never let me forget the difference between Vanessa's life and mine. "Your daughter will never live like your sister's kids," she said to me at Emma's 5th birthday party, which I'd hosted at a local park because I couldn't afford anything fancier. Vanessa had brought her children straight from their private school in matching Ralph Lauren outfits, and they'd looked at Emma's supermarket cake like it was something from another planet. "Face it, Gabby," Vanessa added with that syrupy concern that was really just condescension wrapped in expensive perfume. "You're jealous. You always have been. But some of us worked hard to get where we are, and some of us just complain about it." I smiled and cut the cake and watched my daughter laugh with the few friends I'd invited, and something inside me shifted. Not broke, shifted. Like a gear finally clicking into place after years of being misaligned. Because here's what my mother and sister didn't know. I'd spent the last 5 years appraising properties for some of the wealthiest families in New England, and in that time, I'd learned something valuable. Rich people talk. They brag. They show off their portfolios, their investment strategies, their secret advantages, and I'd been taking notes. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but then again, the best revenge never does. I started small, used the knowledge I'd gathered from years of listening to wealthy clients discuss their portfolios during property tours, invested carefully in emerging biotech companies before they went public, bought into development projects in neighborhoods I knew were about to explode in value. I lived modestly, saved aggressively, and kept my mouth shut. My mother and Vanessa assumed I was still struggling, still scraping by, still the cautionary tale they love to reference at family gatherings. Let them think it. I had learned that being underestimated was the greatest advantage anyone could give you. 2 years ago, I made my first major move. A client of mine, an elderly widow who owned a historic property in Cambridge, wanted to sell quickly and quietly to avoid her greedy nephews fighting over the estate. She sold it to me for below market value, and I renovated it using contractors I'd met through work, designers who owed me favors, architects who appreciated my eye for value. When I sold it 18 months later, I cleared $2.3 million in profit. That's when I started looking at properties on Beacon Hill. You should have seen my mother's face when I told her I was moving. "Beacon Hill?" she laughed, actually laughed, over brunch at her country club. "Gabby, darling, do you have any idea what real estate costs there? You can barely afford Somerville." Vanessa had joined in, explaining to me like I was a child how her neighborhood worked, how you needed connections, how it wasn't just about money but about belonging. I nodded along, let them have their moment, and signed the papers on my new property 3 days later, a 4-story brownstone just 2 blocks from Vanessa's house, purchased through an LLC so my name wouldn't appear in public records. Not yet. I had plans, and those plans required patience. But here's where the story gets interesting, where everything I'd been building towards started to come together in ways I hadn't even fully planned. 4 months ago, I hired an interior designer. Not just any designer, but the woman Vanessa had used for her recent renovation, a boutique decorator named Sloan, who worked exclusively with Boston's elite. Sloan didn't recognize my name, didn't connect me to Vanessa at first. I paid her retainer in full, in cash, and told her I wanted something spectacular. "I want people to walk in and forget how to breathe," I said. She smiled at that, the way creative people do when you speak their language, and got to work.
The renovations took 3 months. I gutted the entire interior while keeping the historical facade intact, installed Italian marble in the bathrooms, had custom millwork done for every room, brought in museum-quality art that I'd been collecting quietly for years. The kitchen was a masterpiece of modern design hidden behind period-appropriate cabinetry. The master suite took up the entire third floor with views of the Charles River. Emma's room was designed like something from a fairy tale, but sophisticated, age-appropriate, beautiful. I spared no expense because I didn't need to. My investments had been paying off better than I had imagined, and I'd been careful, so careful, to keep it all hidden. Sloane finished the project 2 weeks ago, and when she walked through the completed house, she actually cried. "This is the best work I've ever done," she said. "Whoever you are, Gabby, you have incredible taste." Then she paused, tilted her head, and asked, "Wait, are you related to Vanessa Prescott? She mentioned a sister named Gabby, but I didn't think—" I smiled and confirmed it, watched the understanding dawn in her eyes. "Does she know about this?" Sloane asked. "Not yet, but she will." That's when I decided it was time for tea.
I called Vanessa on a Tuesday morning. Casual, friendly, like I'd done 100 times before when I was still playing the role of the lesser sister. "Hey, I know this is random, but I just moved into a new place and I'd love for you to see it. Come over for tea this weekend? Bring the kids if you want. Emma would love to see her cousins." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could practically hear her mind working, trying to figure out if this was some kind of trick, if I was going to embarrass myself somehow. "You moved?" she asked. "Where?" I gave her the address. Another pause, longer this time. "That's Beacon Hill." "Yes," I'd confirmed. "Just come by Saturday at 2. I'll text you the details." Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather, the kind of crisp October day that makes Boston look like a postcard. I'd prepared everything meticulously. Tea service on antique china I'd found at an estate sale, imported cookies from a French bakery, fresh flowers in every room. Emma was with her father for the weekend, which was perfect because I wanted Vanessa to see the house without distractions. I wanted her full attention. She arrived at 2:15, fashionably late as always, wearing a Burberry trench and carrying a designer bag that probably cost $5,000. I watched from the front window as she approached the house, saw her steps slow as she took in the exterior, the restored facade, the private garden visible through the wrought iron fence. She rang the doorbell, and I let her wait just long enough to make her uncomfortable before I answered. "Vanessa, come in, come in." I hugged her, felt her body stiffen with confusion, and led her inside. The foyer was my first statement. Soaring ceilings, a crystal chandelier I'd found at auction, original hardwood floors refinished to perfection. I watched her face as she took it in, saw the moment her brain tried to reconcile what she was seeing with what she thought she knew about my life. "This is your place?" she asked, and there was something in her voice I'd never heard before, something almost like fear. I gave her the full tour, room by room, letting each space speak for itself. The living room with its fireplace and custom built-ins, the dining room that could seat 12 comfortably, the kitchen that made her actually gasp. "How did you—" she started, but I interrupted. "Tea first, questions later." I led her to the sitting room, poured from my grandmother's silver tea service that my mother had given to Vanessa years ago, claiming I wouldn't appreciate it. I'd bought an identical set at an estate sale and had it restored. Vanessa noticed. Of course she noticed. She couldn't help herself. While we sat there sipping tea, her eyes kept darting around the room, cataloging everything, trying to calculate what it all meant. Finally, she pulled out her phone. "Mom needs to see this," she said, and there was something manic in her voice now. "She's not going to believe it." She called our mother, put her on speaker without asking if I minded. "Mom, you have to come to Beacon Hill right now. You have to see what Gabby has done. I'm serious. Drop everything and come here now." My mother arrived 30 minutes later, and that's when things got really interesting. Patricia Huntington swept into my home like she owned it, which was rich considering she'd never once offered to help me with the down payment, never contributed to Emma's expenses, never treated me like anything other than the daughter who'd failed to live up to expectations. She was dressed for the country club, probably had interrupted her bridge game to come here, and her face was set in that expression of vague disapproval she'd perfected over decades.
But as I led her through the house, I watched that expression crack, piece by piece, until by the time we reached the master suite, she looked like someone had slapped her. "How did you afford this?" she demanded. Not "congratulations," not "I'm proud of you," but "how dare you?" That was always the question, wasn't it? How dare I succeed without their help, without their approval, without following their script? I smiled and poured her tea in the sitting room where Vanessa was still perched on the edge of my velvet sofa like she was afraid to get too comfortable. "I worked hard," I said simply. "I made smart investments. I learned from the best clients in the business. You always told me I should be more like Vanessa, so I was. I just did it quietly." Vanessa's face had gone pale. "What kind of investments?" she pressed. "What are you talking about?" I sipped my tea and looked at her over the rim of my cup. "Real estate, mostly. Some stocks. I've been building a portfolio for years. You'd be surprised what you can learn when you actually pay attention instead of just showing off." My mother set her teacup down hard enough it rattled. "This is obscene," she said. "Where did you really get the money for this, Gabby? Did some man buy this for you? Are you going to tell us you've suddenly married some millionaire we've never met?" That's when I laughed, actually laughed, because of course that's where her mind went. It couldn't possibly be that I'd done this myself, that I'd been smart enough and disciplined enough to build something without their help or approval. It had to be a man, had to be something scandalous, had to be anything other than my own competence. "No, man," I said. "Just me, just hard work and smart choices and knowing when to keep my mouth shut." Vanessa stood up abruptly. "I need to use the restroom," she said, and I could tell she was lying, could tell she just needed to escape, to process what this meant. I directed her to the powder room on the first floor, watched her walk away on unsteady legs. My mother stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked, and there was something almost vulnerable in her voice. "Why didn't you let us think you were struggling?" I could have been kind. I could have said something diplomatic, something that would smooth this over and let us all pretend this was a happy surprise. But I'd spent 37 years being kind, being accommodating, being the daughter who accepted the scraps of affection they threw my way.
Because you never asked, I said. Because you were so busy comparing me to Vanessa, so invested in me being the failure of the family, that you never once wondered if maybe I was okay, if maybe I was more than okay. You needed me to be less than her because it made your narrative work. The successful daughter and the struggling single mom. It was easier that way, wasn't it? My mother's face flushed. "That's not fair, Gabby. We've always supported you. We've always been there for you." I raised an eyebrow. "Have you? Name one time you offered to help with Emma. One time you celebrated something I accomplished instead of comparing it to something Vanessa had done better. One time you made me feel like I was enough, just as I was." The silence stretched between us, and I could see her trying to come up with an example, trying to rewrite history in her head to make herself the good guy. She couldn't. Vanessa came back then, and she looked different, shaken. Her phone was in her hand, and she was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I just got a weird call from Sloan," she said slowly. "My interior designer. She said she just realized where she knew your name from. She said she did this house for you." I nodded. "She did. She's incredibly talented." Vanessa's grip on her phone tightened. "She also said something else. She said you paid her in cash, the full amount. Do you have any idea how much she charges?" I did. Of course I did. That was the point. "I have some idea, yes." Vanessa looked at my mother, then back at me. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked, and there was an edge to her voice now, something sharp and cutting. "Planning what?" I asked innocently. "Moving to a nice neighborhood? Buying a beautiful home? Living the kind of life you've been living for years? I wasn't planning anything, Vanessa. I was just living my life." But that wasn't entirely true, and we both knew it. The truth was, I'd been planning this moment for 6 years, ever since Emma was born, and I realized that my family would never see me as anything other than the one who'd messed up, the single mother with the modest job and the modest life. I'd been planning it every time my mother made a cutting remark, every time Vanessa showed off her latest purchase, every time I was excluded from family events because they assumed I couldn't afford to participate. I'd been planning it with every property I appraised, every investment I made, every dollar I saved while they assumed I was drowning in debt.
My mother stood up, smoothing her skirt like she could smooth away her discomfort. "Well," she said, her voice brittle, "this is certainly a surprise. I suppose congratulations are in order." It wasn't really a congratulation. It was an acknowledgement, a begrudging admission that maybe they'd been wrong about me. But it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough, because I hadn't invited them here just to show off my house. That was just the opening act. "There's something else I want to show you," I said, standing up and gesturing for them to follow me. I led them down to the garden level, to a room I'd had specifically designed for this purpose. My home office, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk made from reclaimed wood, state-of-the-art technology hidden behind antique facades. And on the walls, framed and matted professionally, were documents. Lots of documents. Vanessa stepped closer to look at them, and I watched her face change as she realized what she was seeing. Property deeds, stock certificates, investment portfolios. A timeline of my financial growth over the past 6 years, laid out like an art installation. "What is this?" she whispered. "This is my resume," I said. "This is everything I've built while you two were busy pretending I didn't exist, unless you needed someone to feel superior to. This is proof that I didn't need your approval or your help or your pity. I needed you to underestimate me." My mother moved closer, reading the documents with growing horror, not of horror at my success, but of horror at what it meant about her own judgment. "You've been hiding this from us for years. Why? What was the point?" I turned to face her fully. "The point was that I needed to know if you loved me for me, or if you only loved the idea of having a daughter you could fix. And now, I know." Vanessa's phone rang then, loud in the quiet room. She looked at the screen and her face went white. "It's Richard," she said, "my brother-in-law, Mr. Private Equity himself." She answered, listened for a moment, and then her eyes locked on mine. "He says there's been some unusual activity in our investment accounts. He says someone's been asking questions about our portfolio. He wants to know if I know anything about it." That's when I smiled. Really smiled, because this was the moment everything started to come together, the moment they realized this wasn't just about a house, or money, or proving them wrong. This was about something much bigger, something that had been building for years, and they'd been too blind to see it coming. "I think you should take that call. In fact, I think you both should probably go home. We can finish our tea another time." My mother grabbed my arm. "What did you do, Gabby? What are you not telling us?" I gently removed her hand from my arm. "I'm not telling you a lot of things, Mother. That's what happens when you spend years treating someone like they're invisible. You stop seeing what they're capable of." They left in a flurry of confusion and barely concealed panic, and I stood at my front window watching Vanessa's Mercedes speed away to her house 2 blocks over. My phone buzzed with a text from someone they'd never met, someone who'd been helping me put pieces together for months now. "Phase 2 initiated. Are you sure you want to do this?" I typed back a single word. "Yes." Because after 6 years of being silent, after 6 years of watching them build their perfect lives on foundations I was only now beginning to understand were cracked, I was ready to show them exactly what happens when you push someone into the shadows for too long. They learn to see in the dark, and they learn where you've hidden all your secrets.
The next morning, I got a call from Vanessa at 6 a.m., which meant she hadn't slept. Neither had I, but for different reasons. "We need to talk," she said, and her voice was shaking. "We need to talk right now, Gabby. What the hell is going on?" I made coffee, fed my cat, and looked out at the autumn morning breaking over Beacon Hill. "Come over," I said. "Bring Richard, bring Mom. I think it's time we had a real family conversation, the kind we should have had years ago." She hung up without saying goodbye, and I knew they'd be here within the hour. I also knew that by the time they left, nothing in our family would ever be the same again, because the tea I was about to serve them wasn't the imported kind from France. It was the truth, and it was going to burn going down. Everything they thought they knew about me was wrong. Everything they believed about their own perfect lives was about to be questioned, and I was the one holding all the answers they were desperate to find. But those answers came with a price, and I was about to make them pay every penny they owed me for 6 years of dismissal, mockery, and conditional love. This wasn't just about showing them my house. This was about showing them who I'd become despite them, because of them, and ultimately for myself and my daughter.
The real question was, were they ready to face what they'd created when they tried to keep me small? Because I'd grown. I'd grown in ways they couldn't imagine, and now there was no putting me back in the box they'd built for me. Now there was only truth, and consequences, and a reckoning that had been 6 years in the making. They showed up at 7:30, the three of them looking like they hadn't slept in days, which was exactly what I'd expected. Richard Prescott was still in his suit from yesterday, tie loosened, face drawn. My mother wore yoga pants, which was unprecedented because Patricia Huntington never left the house in anything less than full Chanel armor. And Vanessa looked like she'd been crying, her perfect makeup smudged, her designer clothes rumpled. I let them in and led them to my dining room, where I'd set out a proper breakfast spread. Fresh fruit, pastries from the best bakery in the North End, 3 different types of coffee. If we were going to have this conversation, we were going to have it like civilized people. Sit, I said, and something in my tone made them obey without argument. I poured coffee for everyone, added cream and sugar to my mother's cup the way she liked it, and settled into my chair at the head of the table. This was my table, my house, my territory. The power dynamic had shifted, and we all knew it. Richard was the first to speak. Gabby, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this has gone too far. I received calls yesterday from 3 different business associates asking about my firm's investment strategies. They all mentioned your name. They all seemed to think you had some kind of inside information about my accounts. I sipped my coffee calmly. Do they? I asked. Think I have inside information, I mean? His jaw clenched. I don't know what game you're playing, but if you've been accessing confidential information, if you've been using your position as a property appraiser to spy on clients, that's illegal. That's fraud. I could have you arrested. I set my cup down gently. You could try, I said, but you won't, because if you did, you'd have to explain where all your money really comes from, and I don't think you want to do that. The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa looked at her husband with wide eyes. What is she talking about, Richard? He didn't answer, just kept staring at me like he was trying to decide if I was bluffing. I wasn't. Should I tell her, I asked, or would you like to? My mother set her coffee cup down so hard it splashed. Someone tell me what's going on right now, she demanded. I am too old and too tired for games, Gabrielle. If you have something to say it. So I did. I pulled out a folder from the sideboard behind me and opened it on the table. Inside were documents, emails, bank statements, all carefully organized and annotated. For the past 6 years, I've been appraising properties for some of the wealthiest families in Boston. Part of my job is understanding property values, market trends, investment potential. I'm good at my job, very good. So good that clients started talking to me about more than just real estate. They started asking my advice on other investments. They started sharing their strategies, their portfolios, their concerns. I pulled out the first document and slid it across to Vanessa. About 3 years ago, I appraised a property in Newton for one of Richard's college roommates, guy named Trevor Lansing. Remember him, Richard? He told me all about the fund you two started together right after graduation, the one that made all those aggressive short positions right before the 2020 market crash, the one that somehow knew exactly which companies were going to fail. Richard's face had gone very pale. That's public knowledge, he said. Lots of people made money shorting the market in 2020. I nodded. Sure, lots of people, but not everyone had a friend at the CDC who fed them information about which medical supply companies were about to face investigations for price gouging. Not everyone knew about the internal testing failures at certain pharmaceutical companies before those failures went public. Vanessa grabbed the document from the table. What are you saying, Richard? She asked, but her voice was small now, scared. Are you saying Richard was insider trading? I pulled out another document. I'm saying that Richard's fund made very specific bets at very specific times based on information that wasn't publicly available. I'm saying that when I started digging into his business dealings, I found a pattern, and then I found the people who were feeding him that information. My mother leaned forward. This is slander, she said. You can't prove any of this. I smiled at her. Actually, I can. Because Trevor Lansing, Richard's old college roommate, he got divorced 2 years ago. Messy divorce. His ex-wife got access to all his emails, all his records. She wanted to destroy him financially, so she hired a forensic accountant to go through everything. And that accountant found communications between Trevor and Richard discussing trades they made based on information from inside sources. The ex-wife didn't know what to do with that information. She didn't want to go to jail herself for being complicit.
So she just held on to it. I pulled out another page. Until I appraised her new condo in the seaport 6 months ago. We got to talking. She mentioned she used to be married to one of Richard's business partners. I mentioned I was Richard's sister-in-law. She got very quiet, very careful. And then, over several more conversations, several more property viewings, she told me everything. She gave me copies of everything, because she's terrified that if she ever goes public with it, Richard and Trevor will destroy her. But if someone else happened to stumble across that information, someone who had a reason to dig deeper, well, that would be different. Richard stood up so fast his chair fell over. "You're blackmailing me," he said. "You're trying to extort money from me." I didn't stand, didn't raise my voice, just looked at him calmly and said, "Sit down, Richard, we're not done yet." Something in my tone made him hesitate, made him pick up his chair and sit back down, because he knew I had him. "I'm not interested in your money," I continued. "I make enough of my own now, as you've seen. What I'm interested in is the truth. What I'm interested in is understanding how a family can treat one of their own like garbage while building their entire empire on lies and illegal activities. What I'm interested in is why my mother and sister spent 6 years making me feel worthless while propping up a criminal." Vanessa's hands were shaking. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Gabby, I swear I didn't know anything about this." I looked at her, really looked at her, trying to decide if I believed her. "Didn't you?" I asked. "Didn't you ever wonder how Richard's fund consistently outperformed every other fund in the market? Didn't you ever question how you could afford that house, those cars, those vacations on his reported income? Or did you just not want to know because knowing would complicate your perfect life?" She started crying then, real tears, not the performative kind she used to get her way. "This isn't fair," she sobbed. "You can't blame me for not knowing. You can't punish me for Richard's choices." I felt something twist in my chest, something that might have been sympathy if I hadn't spent 6 years being her punching bag. "You're right," I said. "I can't blame you for what Richard did, but I can blame you for how you treated me. I can blame you for every snide comment, every comparison, every time you made me feel small because it made you feel big. That had nothing to do with Richard's money. That was all you." My mother had been quiet through all of this, processing, and now she spoke. "What do you want, Gabby?" she asked. "You've made your point, you've exposed Richard, you've shown us that you're successful and we were wrong about you. What do you want from us now?" This was the question I'd been waiting for. This was the moment I'd been building toward. "I want you to understand something," I said. 6 years ago, when Emma was born, I was terrified. I was alone, broke, trying to figure out how to raise a child by myself. And instead of helping me, instead of supporting me, you made it worse. You made me feel like a failure. You made Emma feel like she was less than her cousins because her mother wasn't married to someone important. I pulled out the last document in my folder. So I decided to become someone important. Not for you, not to prove you wrong, although that was a nice bonus, but for Emma, so she would grow up knowing that her mother was strong, capable, independent, so she would never feel like she needed a man's money or a family's approval to be worthy. I built all of this for her. The document I'd pulled out was a trust fund statement, Emma's trust fund. I'd been contributing to it since she was born, careful amounts at first, larger ones as my investments paid off. My daughter already has more money in her education fund than Vanessa's kids have in all of theirs combined, I said. She's going to go to any college she wants without worrying about cost. She's going to have opportunities I never had. And she's going to grow up knowing that her mother did that for her. Not some man, not some family dynasty, just her mother who loved her enough to be smart and work hard. I pushed the document across the table.
This is what I wanted to show you. This is the real reason I invited you here. Not to brag about my house or my success, but to show you that everything you valued, everything you measured worth by, means nothing if you use it to hurt people. Richard's money is dirty. Your superiority was based on a lie. And I built something real, something clean, something I can be proud of. Richard found his voice finally. "What are you going to do with the information about my fund?" he asked. "Are you going to the authorities?" I considered this. I'd thought about it for months, weighed the options, considered the consequences. "That depends," I said. "On what?" Vanessa asked. "On whether you're willing to make things right." I stood up and walked to the window, looked out at Beacon Hill bathed in morning light. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "Richard, you're going to close your fund. You're going to return the money to your investors with a polite letter explaining that you're pursuing other interests. You're going to stop trading on inside information immediately. If I hear even a whisper that you've continued these practices, I'll turn everything I have over to the SEC and the FBI. Am I clear?" He nodded slowly. "And then?" he asked. "And then you're going to get a real job, something legitimate, something you can actually be proud of. I don't care what it is, consultant, analyst, I don't care, but it has to be legal. And you're going to rebuild your life on honest work." I turned to Vanessa. "And you," I said, "are going to apologize to my daughter. You're going to tell her that you're sorry for making her feel less than, for making her think that money and status are what make a person valuable. You're going to be a real aunt to her, not a judgmental snob who uses a child to feel superior." Vanessa wiped her eyes. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I can do that." Finally, I looked at my mother. "And you," I said, "are going to make a choice. You're going to decide if you want to be a grandmother who loves both her daughters equally, who supports them instead of pitting them against each other, or if you want to keep playing favorites and manipulating everyone around you. Because if you choose the latter, Emma and I are done. You'll never see us again. You'll never be part of her life. And when you die alone because you pushed everyone away with your toxic behavior, you'll have only yourself to blame." My mother's face crumpled, actually crumpled. I'd never seen her look so old, so vulnerable. "That's not fair," she said. "I did my best. I raised you girls with everything I had." I shook my head. "You raised us with conditions. Love wasn't free in our house. It came with expectations and comparisons and constant judgment. That's not parenting. That's control. And I'm done being controlled." There was a long silence. Richard was staring at the table. Vanessa was crying quietly. My mother was looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "What about you?" my mother finally asked. "What are you going to do?" I smiled. "I'm going to keep being exactly who I've become. I'm going to raise my daughter in this beautiful house. I'm going to build my business and make smart investments and live my life on my own terms. And maybe, if you all can learn to be better people, I'll let you be part of it. But that's up to you." Richard stood up again, more carefully this time. "I need to make some calls," he said. "I need to start the process of closing the fund." I nodded. "You have 1 month. After that, I start asking questions to the right people." He left without looking at Vanessa, and I could see the moment she realized how much her life was about to change. The big house, the expensive lifestyle, the social status, all of it was built on illegal activity. All of it was about to disappear. "What am I going to do?" she asked me, and for the first time in our entire relationship, she was asking me for help instead of judging me for needing it.
"You're going to figure out who you are without all the stuff," I said. "You're going to learn what I learned, that your worth isn't in your house or your car or your husband's bank account. It's in how you treat people, how you show up for the people you love, how you live your values instead of just performing them." She nodded, wiping her face. "I don't know if I know how to do that," she admitted. "Then learn," I said. "That's what I had to do. Nobody taught me how to be strong or independent or successful. I figured it out because I had to. Now you have to figure out who you are when the performance is over." My mother hadn't moved from her seat. She was staring at her coffee cup like it held answers. "I was a terrible mother to you," she said finally. wasn't I? I could have lied, could have made her feel better, but we were past that now. Yes, I said, you were. You favored Vanessa from the time we were little. You made me feel like I was never enough. You compared us constantly. You used love as a weapon to control us. And when I didn't follow the path you wanted, you punished me for it. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I was trying to protect you, she said. I saw how hard life was for women without money, without security. I wanted both my daughters to be safe. I sat back down across from her. Safety and control aren't the same thing, Mom. You wanted us to be safe according to your definition, but you never asked what we wanted. You never let us make our own choices. And when I did make my own choices, you made me pay for it. How do I fix this? She asked. How do I make this right? I thought about that question, thought about all the years of pain, all the moments of rejection, all the times I'd felt invisible in my own family. You start by accepting responsibility, I said. You stop making excuses. You stop blaming your own childhood or society or whatever else you've been telling yourself to justify your behavior. You own what you did, and then you change. She nodded slowly. I can do that, she said. I want to do that. We sat there in silence for a moment. Three women who'd been playing roles for so long we'd forgotten how to be real with each other. Then Vanessa spoke. How did you do it? She asked. How did you become this person? How did you go from struggling single mom to this? She gestured around the room, at the house, at everything I'd built. I smiled. I paid attention, I said. Every time I appraised a property, I asked questions. How did you afford this house? What investments worked for you? What would you do differently? I learned from people who'd made fortunes and people who'd lost them. I read every book I could find on investing, on real estate, on building wealth, and I was patient. I didn't expect overnight success. I built slowly, carefully, deliberately. But you were alone, Vanessa said. You had Emma to take care of. How did you manage? I thought about those early years, the late nights after Emma went to bed when I'd study market trends and property values, the weekends when she was with her father and I'd tour open houses in neighborhoods I couldn't afford yet, learning what made properties valuable. The constant discipline of saving money when I wanted to spend it, investing when I wanted to splurge, thinking long-term when short-term relief would have been easier. I managed because I had to, I said. Because nobody was going to save me. Because I wanted my daughter to have a different life than I had. Because every time you or Mom made a comment about my life, about my choices, about my worth, it reminded me why I was doing this. You were my motivation, but not in the way you thought. I didn't want to be like you, Vanessa. I wanted to be better than you. Not richer, not more successful, but better as a person. Kinder, more genuine, less concerned with appearances and more focused on substance. Vanessa flinched at that, but she didn't argue. I don't know how to be that person, she said. I've been performing for so long. I reached across the table and took her hand. Then stop performing, I said. Start by being honest with your kids. Tell them the truth about what's happening. Let them see that their parents are human, that they make mistakes, that life doesn't always go according to plan. Give them the gift you and I never got from Mom, the gift of being allowed to be imperfect. My mother made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob. I really messed you both up, didn't I? She said. I squeezed Vanessa's hand and let go. You did the best you could with what you knew, I said to my mother. That's all any parent can do. But now you know better, so do better. That's all I'm asking. That's all Emma deserves. That's all any of us deserve. Richard came back then, his phone in his hand, his face grim. I've started the process, he said to Vanessa. Called the lawyers. We need to go home and talk. Vanessa stood up, gathering her purse. She looked at me, and there was something different in her eyes now. Respect, maybe, or fear, or both. Thank you, she said, for not destroying us. You could have, but you didn't. I stood to walk them out. I didn't do this to destroy you, I said. I did it to save myself, to save Emma. What you do with this information, how you choose to move forward, that's up to you. But know this, I'm not your scapegoat anymore. I'm not the daughter or sister you can look down on to feel better about yourselves. I'm your equal, and I expect to be treated that way. They left together, Richard and Vanessa, walking out to face whatever their future held. My mother lingered in the doorway. Can I see Emma sometime? Can I start over with her, with both of you? I considered this. Emma deserved to know her grandmother, but she also deserved to be protected from toxic behavior. We'll see, I said. Prove to me that you've changed. Show me through your actions, not your words. And maybe, in time, we can build something new, something real. She nodded and left, and I stood in my doorway watching her walk down Beacon Hill, her shoulders slumped, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. I felt something shift inside me, a weight I'd been carrying for years finally lifting. This wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about truth, about refusing to be diminished, about claiming my space in a family that had tried to keep me small. I closed the door and walked through my beautiful house, running my hands along the walls I'd chosen, the furniture I'd selected, the art I'd collected. Every piece had a story. Every room represented a choice I'd made, a victory I'd won, a step I'd taken toward becoming the person I needed to be. Not for them, for me. For Emma. My phone buzzed with a text from my daughter. "Can we get ice cream when I get home tomorrow?" It read. "I miss you, Mommy." I smiled and typed back, "Of course, baby. We can do whatever you want. I love you." And I meant it. Everything I'd done, every risk I'd taken, every move I'd made, it was all for her. So she'd grow up knowing that women don't need to be rescued. They don't need to marry money or please difficult mothers or compete with sisters. They need to be smart, strong, independent, and true to themselves. 3 months later, Richard's fund was officially closed. He took a position as a consultant for a legitimate investment firm, taking a massive pay cut but staying out of jail. Vanessa sold their Beacon Hill house and moved to a smaller place in Brookline. My mother started therapy, which I'd suggested and she'd actually listened to. She called me once a week now, not to criticize or compare, but to ask how Emma was doing, to share stories from her own week, to slowly rebuild a relationship that had been broken for decades. And me? I kept building, kept growing my business, my investments, my life. I started teaching a course at Boston University on property investment for women, sharing what I'd learned with others who might be where I once was. I dated occasionally, but I wasn't in a hurry. I didn't need a man to complete me or validate me or provide for me. I was complete on my own. Emma started at a new school, one of the best private schools in Boston, and I watched her flourish. She made friends, joined the debate team, started talking about becoming an architect. She was confident, articulate, kind, everything I'd hoped she would be. And when people asked her about her family, she didn't talk about her grandmother's country club or her aunt's former mansion. She talked about her mom, who built a successful business, who taught her that strength comes from within, who showed her through action what it means to be a strong woman in a world that often tries to keep women small. Vanessa and I met for coffee once a month now. Real coffee, not performative tea parties. We talked about our kids, our lives, our challenges. She was different now, softer, more genuine. She apologized to Emma, a real apology, and started being an aunt instead of a judge. It wasn't perfect. We had decades of dysfunction to work through, but it was real, and real was better than perfect. One afternoon, sitting in my office looking at my financial statements, I calculated that I was now worth more than Richard had been at the height of his illegal trading. More than that, every dollar I had was earned honestly, built on hard work and smart choices and determination. I'd done more than prove my family wrong. I'd proven to myself that I was capable of anything I set my mind to. The moral of this story isn't about revenge, though that was certainly satisfying. It's not about money, though that provided the freedom I needed. It's about knowing your worth when everyone around you tries to convince you you're worthless. It's about refusing to accept someone else's narrative about who you are and what you're capable of.
It's about the quiet power of patience, discipline, and self-belief. My mother had laughed and said my daughter would never live like my sister's kids. She was right, but not in the way she meant. Emma won't live like her cousins did, in a house built on illegal money and family dysfunction. She'll live better. She'll live with integrity, with confidence, with the knowledge that she can achieve anything through honest work and determination. She'll live knowing that her mother loved her enough to become strong, to stand up to family pressure, to build something real. And when Emma is older, when she asks me about these years, about why we don't see my family as much as other kids see their extended families, I'll tell her the truth. I'll tell her that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you most will try to keep you small because your growth threatens their sense of superiority. I'll tell her that family isn't just about blood, it's about respect and support and genuine love. I'll tell her that she should never let anyone, not even family, make her feel less than she is.
But mostly, I'll tell her that she was the reason I found my strength, that becoming her mother forced me to become the person I needed to be, that every sacrifice, every late night, every risk I took was worth it, because she deserved a mother who modeled strength instead of victimhood, independence instead of dependence, genuine success instead of borrowed prestige. The day my family came over for tea was the day I stopped being invisible. But the real victory wasn't in showing them my house or exposing Richard's crimes. It was in realizing I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need them to see my worth because I saw it myself. And once you see your own worth, once you truly understand what you're capable of, nobody can take that away from you. I built this empire not to spite my family, but to save myself and my daughter. The fact that it also exposed their hypocrisy and forced them to reckon with their own behavior was just a bonus. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about truth. Sometimes it's about refusing to be small anymore. Sometimes it's about building something so undeniable that the people who tried to diminish you have no choice but to acknowledge what you've become. And that's exactly what I did. I took all the pain, all the rejection, all the years of being treated like I wasn't enough, and I turned it into fuel. I became more than they said I could be. I built more than they thought I was capable of building. I proved every single assumption they made about me wrong. Not for them, for me, for Emma, for every woman who's ever been made to feel like she's not enough because she didn't follow someone else's script for her life. We are enough. We are capable. We are strong. And we don't need anyone's permission to claim our space in this world. That's the real story. That's the truth I wanted them to see when they came over for tea. And in the end, they did see it. They had no choice because I made it impossible to ignore. Before you click away, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm grateful you spent these moments with me. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. Another powerful story is coming soon. Until then, take care, stay strong, and keep going.